My parents stranded me at a railway station as a prank, saying, "Let's watch her get herself home." I never returned. 2 decades later, they tracked me down. This morning, 29 unanswered calls. Can you imagine being a scared, lonely 12-year-old, watching your own parents drive away, laughing, leaving you stranded in a city 3 hours from home? That nightmare was my reality, a trauma I buried deep, until this morning, when 29 missed calls from an unknown number ripped open old wounds and forced me to confront the past I swore I'd left behind forever. What would you do when the very people who abandoned you suddenly reappear, begging for a second chance? My name is Megan Miller. I'm 32, a graphic designer here in Chicago. For years, I was Jennifer Taylor, growing up in a town called Ridgeview, Pennsylvania. To outsiders, we were the perfect family, Frank and Karen, successful business owners, with their 2 kids, Ethan and me. But behind closed doors, our home was a minefield. Dad's booming laugh and generous persona vanished the moment he walked through our door. His drinking started around dinner and escalated through the night. Mom? She wasn't a protector, she was his enabler, always making excuses. Your father works so hard, he just needs to blow off some steam. Their tough love was just cruelty. I remember when I was 7, they left me at a grocery store for over an hour because I asked for candy. "Maybe now you'll learn not to be so greedy," Mom had sneered when they finally returned, finding me sobbing by the customer service desk. My older brother, Ethan, was the golden child, star quarterback, straight A's, Dad's fishing buddy. While I was grilled for a 97% on a math test, asking what happened to the other 3%, Ethan would be praised for a B+. I became the family scapegoat. Dinner was cold? My fault. Dad had a bad day? Probably because I distracted Mom. The psychological burden was crushing. My 11th birthday still haunts me. Mom promised a small party. I was so excited. But that morning, they announced an amusement park trip instead. I was disappointed, but tried to hide it. We drove for almost an hour. They pulled into the parking lot, handed me $20 and said, "Have fun. We'll pick you up at 5 p.m. I spent my birthday alone, too terrified to go on any rides, just sitting on a bench, watching other families laugh. They picked me up at 7 p.m., not 5 p.m., finding me in tears. "Just teaching you to be independent." Dad had laughed. "Besides, we had to pick up your cake." There was no cake at home. No presents. When I cried, they called me ungrateful. I learned to cope, staying quiet, trying to be invisible, losing myself in art. Drawing became my escape, a world where adults were kind. The day before everything changed, it was crystal clear. I got my report card, straight A's, except for 1 A in science. To most parents, a celebration. To mine? Unacceptable. An A-. Dad had bellowed, waving it. "What's wrong with you? Lazy?" Ethan never got A-. I tried to whisper, I tried really hard. Mom chimed in, clearly not hard enough. "We're not raising mediocre children." That night, I overheard them. "She needs to learn life doesn't hand you anything," Dad said. "She's too soft, too sensitive. Maybe she needs a real lesson." Mom agreed, something she won't forget. The next morning, they announced a family day trip to Chicago. Ethan couldn't come. A flicker of hope ignited. Maybe this was their way of apologizing. I couldn't have been more wrong. Dad was unusually cheerful at breakfast, Mom was humming. The change was so dramatic it made me uneasy. The drive took 3 hours. Dad played classic rock, Mom quizzed me on state capitals. Get one wrong, Dad would mock. As we neared Chicago, Mom turned, an odd smile on her face. "So, Jennifer," she said, "think you're pretty smart?" I guess," I cautiously replied. "Book smart, maybe," Dad interjected. "But street smart? That's different." Mom added, chillingly, "Real life doesn't grade on a curve." The knot in my stomach tightened. We parked near Union Station around noon. It was massive, overwhelming. "Hungry?" Dad asked. I nodded, still clinging to hope. "Good. Wait here by this pillar," Mom instructed, pointing to a huge column. "We're going to move the car and grab some food. We'll be back in 15 minutes. Can't I come with you?" I asked, anxiety creeping in. What? Are you a baby? Dad laughed. It's just 15 minutes. You're 12 years old, for God's sake. But I don't know Chicago. I protested weakly. Exactly, Mom said, with that strange emphasis. Stay right here. Don't move. I watched them disappear into the crowd. 12:17 p.m. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. Then 30. My simmering anxiety boiled into full-blown panic. Had they forgotten? At the hour mark, I was fighting back tears. No cell phone. No money for a payphone. Just $7 my allowance. Then, through the large windows, I saw our blue Ford Taurus drive slowly past. My heart leaped. They got lost. I ran, waving frantically. As the car passed, I saw them. Dad was driving slowly. He grinned and waved. Not a wave of relief, but a taunting gesture. Mom rolled down her window and shouted words that would forever echo in my nightmares. Let's see how you find your way home. Their laughter echoed as they sped away. I stood frozen. They left me. On purpose. 3 hours from home. Alone. The denial crumbled into crushing reality. This wasn't a 15-minute lesson. They weren't parking around the corner, waiting to jump out. They were driving back to Pennsylvania without me. Panic set in. I ran back inside the station, gasping, tears streaming. Union Station became a terrifying maze. Too many people, too much noise. Where could I go? What could I do? No phone, no contacts, not enough money for a ticket, no ID. For 2 hours, I wandered in a daze, breaking down in sobs, terrified to ask for help because my parents had always warned me about stranger danger. Around 3:30 p.m., a station employee named Janet, an older woman with kind eyes, noticed me. "Honey, are you lost?" she asked, kneeling down. I shook my head, trained to never admit trouble. "Where are your parents?" she persisted gently. They want to move the car," I lied, my voice cracking. "When was that?" Janet asked, her concern deepening. I couldn't maintain the facade. 3 hours of fear, confusion, and abandonment poured out in a flood of tears. "They left me," I sobbed. "They drove away and said to find my way home. But home is in Pennsylvania." Janet's face shifted from concern to alarm. She took me to a quiet area, gave me water, and listened. I told her everything, my parents, the A-, watching them drive away. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Jennifer Taylor." "And how old are you, Jennifer?" Her face hardened for a moment, then softened. "I'm going to help you, Jennifer. What you're describing is not okay." "Not at all." She called her supervisor, then security. Officer Marcus took over, asking questions about my parents, our address. I saw the adults exchanging grim glances. "We need to call the police," Marcus finally said. "What your parents did is abandonment. It's against the law." That was how, at 4:45 p.m. on a Saturday, I found myself sitting in an office at Union Station, watching Officer Teresa Ramirez file a report about my abandonment. My whole body felt numb. The fluorescent lights of the Chicago Police Department buzzed overhead. I sat wrapped in a borrowed blanket, though it wasn't cold. Officer Ramirez brought me hot chocolate. "We've tried calling your home number twice," she said. No answer. My stomach twisted. "Maybe they're still driving back?" I suggested weakly. A desperate part of me hoped this was an extreme lesson, that they'd turn around. "Maybe," she replied, but her tone suggested otherwise. Laura Donovan from the Department of Children and Family Services arrived. She was kind, asking gentle questions. Had my parents done anything like this before? Yes, but never this extreme. Did they ever hit me? No, not physically. Did I feel safe at home? I hesitated, and that was answer enough. "What's going to happen to me tonight?" I asked, my voice tiny. Laura explained I'd be in emergency foster care. The words chilled me. "We have a wonderful family," she assured me. The Williams family, with a daughter my age. By 9 p.m., I was picking at spaghetti at the Williams dining table. Their daughter, Alicia, showed me to the guest room. "Your parents will probably come get you tomorrow," she said, trying to be helpful. I nodded, but didn't believe it. I didn't sleep. I replayed the image of them driving away laughing. What kind of parents did that? What had I done to deserve it? The next morning, Laura Donovan returned. Her expression told me everything. "We reached your parents late last night. Are they coming to get me?" I asked, already knowing. "Not yet," Laura replied. "They said they were teaching you a lesson about independence and problem-solving. They claimed they planned to call the station after a few hours to check on you, but things escalated when authorities became involved." Translation: they never planned to call. They expected me to panic, cry, and then what? Magically find my way home with no money, no phone, no ID? "Your brother Ethan confirmed you were expected home yesterday evening," Laura continued. "He was surprised when his parents returned without you." A fresh wave of betrayal washed over me. So Ethan hadn't been in on it. Small comfort. "What happens now?" I asked. "We'd have a meeting at her office tomorrow. My parents would be there. A judge had been notified." The next 36 hours were a blur. The Williams family was kind, but I felt like a ghost. I went through the motions, numb. The meeting was set for 2 p.m. Monday. Laura drove me to a government building. "You don't have to speak to your parents if you don't want to," she assured me. "I'll be with you the whole time." We entered a conference room. Laura's supervisor and a family court liaison were already there. 5 minutes later, the door opened. My parents walked in. They looked haggard, nothing like the confident, laughing people who'd driven away from Union Station. Dad's face was gaunt. Mom's eyes were red. Behind them, a man in a suit, their attorney. "Jennifer," Mom said, stepping toward me. I flinched back. "Please take your seats," the supervisor instructed firmly. What followed was the most surreal conversation of my young life. My parents, guided by their attorney, spun their version. They were concerned about my lack of self-reliance. The train station had been a controlled life lesson. They claimed they'd circled back after 20 minutes, couldn't find me, and assumed I'd called home or gotten help, showing the resourcefulness they wanted to encourage. They drove home expecting a message from me. "We were teaching her independence," Dad insisted. "Kids today are too coddled. By abandoning your 12-year-old daughter in a city 3 hours from home with no money, no phone, and no ID?" Laura's supervisor asked, incredulously. "She's exaggerating how little money she had," Mom said dismissively. "And there are phones everywhere. She could have called collect." I sat in stunned silence. They weren't sorry. They truly believed they'd done nothing wrong. The meeting continued, discussing child welfare laws, potential charges, next steps. My parents maintained their position. This was a parenting choice, perhaps extreme, but with good intentions. Finally, I was asked if I wanted to return home. I found my voice. "No," I said firmly, surprising even myself. "I don't want to go back." The shock on their faces might have been satisfying under different circumstances. "Don't be ridiculous." Dad sputtered. "Of course, you're coming home." "That's not your decision right now, Mr. Taylor," the court liaison explained. "Given the circumstances, Jennifer will remain in temporary custody." As the meeting ended, Mom tried one more time. "Jennifer, honey, you're overreacting." "You abandon people who trust you," I interrupted, tears finally streaming. "That's what I learned." I was escorted from the room, their protests fading behind me. In that moment, I knew I would never see our house in Ridgeview as home again. The next few weeks were a blur of court hearings, social workers, and therapy. The Williams family was kind, but their home was just a waiting room. 1 month later, I met Thomas and Sarah Miller. Early 40s, warm smiles. Thomas taught high school art. Sarah was a pediatric nurse. No biological children, but foster parents for over a decade. "We believe every child deserves safety, respect, and room to grow," Sarah explained. "No pressure to talk until you're ready," Thomas added. "Our home is open to you for as long as you need." Something about them was so genuine. When my social worker, Grace Chin, asked if I'd try a placement with them, I cautiously nodded. The Millers lived in Evanston. My room had pale yellow walls, a window seat, empty bookshelves. "We want you to make it your own," Sarah said. "Pictures, posters, books, whatever makes you comfortable." "What are the rules?" I asked wearily, remembering my parents' shifting expectations. Thomas and Sarah exchanged glances. "Basic respect and safety," Thomas replied. "Letting us know where you are, helping with chores, doing your best in school." We'll figure out the details together. I waited for the catch, the impossible standards. They never came. The contrast was disorienting. The first time I spilled juice at dinner, I froze in terror, waiting for the anger. Instead, Sarah simply handed me a cloth. No worries. Accidents happen. Trust came slowly, painfully. I kept waiting for them to drop the act, to show the cruelty I'd been trained to expect. But day after day, they remained consistent in their gentle support. Meanwhile, the legal process continued. My parents attended mandatory parenting classes, but with minimal effort, Grace said. They complained that the state had overreacted. Dr. Reynolds, my therapist, helped me understand emotional abuse, neglect, abandonment, PTSD, anxiety. She helped me see that their behavior wasn't normal. And, more importantly, it wasn't my fault. Nothing you could have done would have justified what they did, she emphasized, until I began to believe it. 3 months into my stay, Ethan came to visit. He was 16 now, but seemed smaller, less the golden child, more just a teenager uncomfortable in his own skin. We sat awkwardly in the Millers' living room. They miss you, Ethan finally said, staring at his hands. Do they? I asked, skeptical. In their way, he admitted. Dad's drinking more. Mom's always cleaning. Are they sorry? Ethan hesitated. They're sorry you're gone. I don't think they understand why what they did was wrong. And you? I challenged. Do you understand? My brother looked up, his eyes meeting mine directly for perhaps the first time. I knew they were harder on you. I should have said something, done something. I'm sorry, Jen. It wasn't enough, but it was honest. We talked for another hour, cautiously, navigating our shared past. Before he left, he hugged me awkwardly and whispered, I'm glad you're safe. We didn't speak again for many years. The court proceedings culminated 6 months after Union Station. Based on evaluations, home studies, and my testimony, the judge ruled a pattern of emotional abuse culminating in severe neglect and endangerment. My parents were given a choice, an intensive 2-year rehab program with supervised visitation, or surrender their parental rights. To everyone's surprise but mine, they chose the latter. We won't be vilified for trying to raise a strong, independent daughter, my father declared to the court. If the state thinks it can do better, let it try. And just like that, with a stroke of a pen, Frank and Karen Taylor were no longer legally my parents. 3 months later, on my 13th birthday, Thomas and Sarah Miller asked if I would like them to adopt me. By then, I believed in the permanence of their care, the consistency of their love. Yes, I answered, without hesitation. The adoption was finalized shortly before my 15th birthday. As part of the process, I requested a legal name change. Jennifer Taylor became Megan Miller. A new name for my new life. You'll always be whoever you want to be in our home, Sarah assured me. We just feel lucky to be part of your journey. Art became my salvation. Thomas nurtured my talent, providing supplies, books, gentle guidance. My sketchbooks became a visual diary, moving from dark, fragmented images to color, form, and eventually, hope. High school brought new challenges. Trust issues don't disappear overnight, but I slowly built connections with a small group of art students who accepted my quiet nature. College applications loomed. With Thomas and Sarah's encouragement, I aimed for the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Wherever you want to go, we'll help you get there, Thomas promised. The acceptance letter arrived on a snowy March afternoon. Sarah cried tears of joy. Thomas framed the letter. I finally allowed myself to believe the future could be something bright, something beautiful of my own making. Before leaving for college, I made a decision. I would completely cut ties with my birth family. Are you sure? Sarah asked gently. You might feel differently someday. I'm sure, I replied. The Taylors are my past. You're my family now. And with that resolution, I stepped forward. College at SAIC Chicago was a world I'd only dreamed about. Creative energy, bright hair, professors who believed art could change the world. The freedom to experiment and grow. I declared graphic design, discovering a passion for combining visual art with practical communication. Each successful project built confidence that had been systematically dismantled. Thomas and Sarah supported me from afar, sending care packages, respecting my independence while ensuring their home remained my sanctuary. They showed me what healthy parent-child relationships could be. Sophomore year brought Audrey into my life. We met in color theory. Her bold experiments contrasted with my restrained palette, yet we clicked. "You're the most careful artist I've ever met," she observed. "Every mark you make is deliberate." "Is that bad?" I asked defensively. "Not bad," she clarified. "Just interesting. Makes me wonder what happens when you let go." Audrey pushed me creatively, respected my boundaries. When I finally shared snippets of my past, she listened without pity, then simply said, "They really screwed up losing someone like you." Audrey convinced me to try dating junior year. Brian was a photography major, kind eyes, patient hands. Our first date, coffee, stretched to 5 hours. He talked about his rural Wisconsin upbringing. I shared carefully edited versions of my own background. "My birth parents weren't good people," I explained vaguely. "I was adopted." "Family is complicated," he replied simply. "I'm more interested in who you are now than where you came from." Our relationship developed slowly. Brian never pushed for more intimacy than I was ready to give. The first time he reached for my hand and I flinched, he just nodded and continued our conversation. The next time, I was ready. Dr. Reynolds had prepared me for the challenges of adult relationships after childhood trauma. "Trust issues don't just affect romantic partnerships," she'd explained. "They color every human connection. The key is awareness." This awareness helped when Brian and I had our first serious conflict. A miscommunication about plans led to me waiting alone at a restaurant for over an hour. By the time he arrived, profusely apologetic about his dead phone, I was hyperventilating in a bathroom stall. "You left me," I accused later, the words carrying the weight of far more than a delayed dinner. Brian listened as I explained, really explained, what happened at the train station. When I finished, he didn't offer empty platitudes. "I can't promise I'll never disappoint you," he said finally. "But I can promise I'll never deliberately hurt you, and I'll always come back." It wasn't enough to heal all wounds, but it was honest. Our relationship continued, stronger for the vulnerability. Graduation came with excitement and anxiety. The protective bubble of academia was ending. Thanks to a professor, I secured an interview at Element Design, a firm specializing in branding for nonprofits. "We like your portfolio," the creative director told me. "But more importantly, we like your approach. There's thoughtfulness in your designs that can't be taught." I started at Element 2 weeks after graduation, renting a tiny studio. My own space. The first time I'd lived completely alone. I painted the walls soft blue, hung my own artwork, bought plants that required daily care. A small exercise in nurturing life. Work challenged me. Collaborating with clients, presenting concepts, defending choices. My supervisor, Nadia, intuitively understood when to push and when to support. "Your work speaks for itself," she advised after I stumbled through an early presentation. "Trust that, and the confidence will follow." She was right. Within 2 years, I was leading projects. The scared girl from the train station seemed increasingly distant, though therapy continued to help me integrate these different versions of myself. At 27, Brian proposed during a weekend visit to Sarah and Thomas. He'd asked their blessing first, recognizing their centrality in my life. We married in a small ceremony the following spring, Audrey as my maid of honor, Thomas walking me down the aisle. "You've built something beautiful," Sarah whispered during our mother-daughter dance. "We built it together," I corrected, embracing the woman who had shown me what motherhood should be. Around this time, my birth parents made their first attempt to contact me. A Facebook message from Karen. "Jennifer, we've been thinking about you. Would love to reconnect. Dad and I are still in Ridgeview." I stared at the message for hours, then showed Brian and Dr. Reynolds. With their support, I decided to maintain the boundaries I'd established years before. I blocked the account without responding. The intrusions disturbed me, but I refused to let them derail the life I'd worked so hard to build. Instead, I channeled the complicated emotions into a new venture. In 2008, I left Element Design to start my own studio, focusing on branding for organizations supporting children and families in crisis. Miller Creative became my professional identity, a name representing not just my work, but the family who had saved me. Brian supported my entrepreneurial leap completely. We discussed children, but agreed to revisit the question. The thought of parenthood still triggered complex emotions, fears of inadvertently reproducing patterns. "You're not them," Dr. Reynolds reminded me. "The very fact that you're concerned about this shows how different you are." Our apartment eventually gave way to a small house. The day we moved in, Brian surprised me with a rescue dog, a gentle one-eyed mutt named Scout, who had his own history of abandonment. "Thought you two might understand each other," Brian explained. He was right. Scout and I bonded immediately, his unquestioning affection healing parts of me that still harbored doubt. With each passing year, the life I'd built felt increasingly solid. My business thrived, my marriage deepened, and my relationship with Thomas and Sarah evolved into the adult parent-child dynamic I'd never expected. My chosen family expanded to include Brian's parents and sisters. I had created a stable, healthy existence despite, or perhaps because of, the trauma that had shaped me. The memories remained, but their power diminished with each conscious choice to live differently than I had been raised. Until this morning, when my phone lit up with 29 missed calls. The carefully constructed walls between past and present began to crumble. I stared at the screen, disbelief warring with a rising dread. 29 missed calls from an unknown number with a Pennsylvania area code. The notification glared, a digital intrusion from a past I'd worked so hard to erase. My finger hovered over the voicemail icon, heart pounding. Scout sensed my distress, pressing his warm body against my legs. The ordinary breakfast scene, coffee, toast, client emails, was suddenly transformed by this unexpected connection to my former life. I pressed play, holding my breath. "Jennifer or Megan?" "I guess it's Megan now." A male voice, older but instantly recognizable. "Ethan, it's your brother. I know it's been years and you probably don't want to hear from any of us, but Dad had a heart attack last night. It's bad. The doctors aren't sure if he'll make it. I thought you should know. My number is..." I disconnected before the message finished. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the phone. Scout whined, nudging my palm with his nose. "I'm okay," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "I'm okay." But I wasn't. My carefully constructed compartmentalization was crumbling. Within minutes, other notifications appeared. An email from an address I didn't recognize, subject line, "Your father, please read." A Facebook message request, "Jennifer, it's Mom. Please call. It's urgent." 20 years of silence and now this barrage. Why now? What did they want from me? The panic attack hit without warning. My chest tightened. Breathing became shallow. The kitchen walls seemed to close in. I hadn't experienced one this severe in years. Fumbling for my phone, I called Dr. Reynolds' office, grateful when she agreed to see me within the hour. "Your reaction is completely normal," she assured me as I sat in her familiar office, clutching a tissue. "This is a significant trigger connecting to your core trauma." "I don't understand why I'm so affected," I admitted. "I made peace with cutting them off years ago." "Did you?" she asked gently. "Or did you build a life around the absence of that peace?" The question hit harder than I expected. Had I truly processed my childhood, or just successfully avoided confronting its deepest wounds? "What do I do?" I asked finally. "That depends on what you want," Dr. Reynolds replied. "There's no right answer here, Megan. You can maintain the boundaries you've established, which would be entirely valid. Or you can engage on your own terms. If there's something you need from this interaction, what would I possibly need from them?" "Only you can answer that," she said. "Closure. Answers. The opportunity to speak your truth. Or perhaps confirmation that your decision to leave was the right one." I left the session with more questions than answers, but also with grounding techniques to manage the anxiety. Back home, I called the two people who had earned the right to advise me on family matters. Sarah answered on the second ring. "Megan, what a lovely surprise." The moment I heard her voice, I broke down again. Through tears, I explained the situation. "Oh, sweetheart," she said when I finished. What can we do? Tell me what to do. I pleaded. You know we can't do that, she replied gently. But I can tell you that whatever you decide, Thomas and I support you completely. Your relationship, or lack thereof, with your birth family doesn't change anything between us. After hanging up, I called Audrey, who offered to come over immediately. Within an hour, she was at my kitchen table, pouring wine despite the early hour. Okay, let's think this through, she said pragmatically. What's the worst that could happen if you respond? They could try to pull me back into their dysfunction, I listed. Make me feel responsible. Dismiss everything they did. Re-traumatize me. And what's the worst that could happen if you don't respond? I considered this carefully. I might always wonder, I admitted. Maybe regret not having said what I needed to say. So, the question isn't really about them, Audrey observed. It's about what you need. When Brian came home that evening, he found me surrounded by research, printouts about heart attacks, treatment protocols, recovery rates. My graphic designer's mind had created a flowchart of possible responses and their potential consequences. I see you've been busy, he said, kissing the top of my head. I need to understand what's happening medically before I decide anything, I explained. If this is really life or death, or if it's a manipulation, Brian finished when I trailed off. Is that terrible of me to even think that? No, he said firmly. It's self-protective. And smart. We talked late into the night, weighing options and scenarios. Brian, who had never met my birth family, but had witnessed the aftermath of their damage, maintained that I owed them nothing. But this isn't about owing, he acknowledged. It's about what will help you move forward. By morning, I had reached a decision. I would not call or visit immediately, but I would respond to Ethan's message with a text. This is Megan. I got your message about Dad. I need more information before deciding my next steps. How serious is his condition? What exactly do you and Mom expect from me? His reply came within minutes. Thank you for responding. It was a major heart attack. He's stable but critical. Triple bypass scheduled tomorrow. Mom's a mess. We don't expect anything. Just thought you should know. Would understand completely. If you want no part of this. The sincerity surprised me. I wrote back, I need time to think. I'll be in touch. Over the next 3 days, I engaged in intense self-reflection, spoke with Dr. Reynolds again, and ultimately made my decision. I would meet with Ethan, and only Ethan, at a neutral location to get a clearer picture of the situation before considering any contact with my parents. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our locations. Seeing my brother after 20 years was surreal. The teenager I remembered was now a middle-aged man with thinning hair and glasses, dressed in a rumpled shirt and khakis. Megan, he said, standing awkwardly as I approached his table. Thank you for coming. I nodded, not quite ready for pleasantries. You look great, he offered. Really great. Tell me about Dad, I said, getting straight to the point. Ethan sighed, seeming relieved to focus on facts. Triple bypass was successful, but there were complications. He's still in ICU. Doctors are cautiously optimistic, but at 68, with his history, what history? High blood pressure, high cholesterol, still drinks too much, Ethan explained. He retired 5 years ago when his heart problems started. Sold the hardware store. I absorbed this, trying to reconcile the larger-than-life figure from my childhood with this aging, failing man. And Mom. Falling apart, basically. They've been married 45 years. For better or worse, they're completely dependent on each other. Are you close to them? I asked, genuinely curious about the life that had continued in my absence. Ethan hesitated. Yes and no. I live about an hour away, see them monthly. Nancy, my wife, isn't their biggest fan, so we keep some distance. Why not? Another hesitation. After you left, things changed. Or maybe I just started seeing more clearly. They never really took responsibility for what happened with you. There were a lot of stories they told, to themselves, to family, to everyone. What did they tell people about me? I asked, both dreading and needing to know. At first, that you were staying with friends in Chicago for school opportunities. Later, that you'd become rebellious and cut contact despite their best efforts. Most people believed them. They were good at presenting themselves as victims. The familiar anger rose in my chest. And you let them? Yes, he admitted quietly. For years, I did. I was 18, heading to college. It was easier to accept their version than confront what really happened. I'm not proud of that. His honesty disarmed me slightly. Why are you reaching out now, after all this time? Just because Dad is sick. Partly, Ethan acknowledged. But also because my daughter Emma is 12 now. The age you were when it happened. Watching her grow up has made everything so much clearer. The thought of anyone doing to her what they did to you, he shook his head, unable to finish. We talked for nearly 2 hours. Ethan filled in the 20-year gap, telling me about his life as an accountant, his wife Nancy, their 2 children. He answered my questions about our parents with painful honesty, neither defending their actions nor exaggerating their faults. Have they ever expressed genuine remorse? I asked finally. Not regret that I left, but actual understanding of what they did wrong? In moments, Ethan replied. Dad has said things when drinking that he went too far, that he wishes things had been different. Mom still struggles more with taking responsibility. But they've both asked about you over the years. They keep a photo of you, your high school photo, from before on their mantle. The image disturbed me, my younger self, preserved in their home like a memorial, while the person I'd become remained unknown to them. Would you consider visiting Dad in the hospital? Ethan asked eventually. You wouldn't have to talk to him if he's awake. And I can make sure Mom isn't there if you prefer. I considered the request carefully. I need to think about it. Of course, he nodded. And Megan, whatever you decide is okay. You don't owe any of us anything. As we parted, Ethan hesitantly offered his hand. I took it briefly. This physical connection to my past, both strange and significant. That night, I discussed everything with Brian, who supported my inclination to see my father while maintaining strict boundaries. Just remember, he cautioned. You're not that powerless 12-year-old anymore. You're visiting on your terms. You can leave anytime. The next morning, I called Dr. Reynolds and asked if she would accompany me to the hospital, not as my therapist, but as a support person who understood the complexity of the situation. She agreed immediately. This is an opportunity to engage with your past from a position of strength, she observed. But only if that's what you truly want. I thought about the scared girl at Union Station, the years of healing, the life I'd built, and the parents who had chosen to abandon me. Then I thought about the man in the hospital bed, facing his own mortality. Yes, I said finally. I think I need to do this. Not for them, but for me. The hospital corridor seemed endless. Dr. Reynolds and I walked toward the cardiac ICU. Each step required conscious effort, my body seemingly trying to protect me by refusing to move forward. The antiseptic smell, the hushed voices, the occasional urgent beeping, everything heightened my already overwhelming anxiety. We can take a break, Dr. Reynolds offered, noticing my shallow breathing. I shook my head. If I stop, I might not start again. Ethan waited at the ICU entrance, relief visible on his face when he saw us. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. Dad's awake, but tired from physical therapy. Mom's at the cafeteria. He quickly added, I made sure to schedule this when she'd be away, as you requested. And she agreed to that? I asked skeptically. Not exactly, Ethan admitted. I told her I needed time alone with Dad to discuss insurance matters. His discomfort with the deception was obvious. I introduced Dr. Reynolds simply as a friend, and Ethan didn't question her presence. As we approached my father's room, Ethan touched my arm lightly. Just so you're prepared, he looks different. Older, obviously, and the surgery, I nodded, bracing myself. Nothing could have fully prepared me for the sight of Frank Taylor. Once so imposing in my childhood memories, now diminished in a hospital bed, surrounded by monitoring equipment. Tubes and wires connected to his pale body, a nasal cannula delivering oxygen. His chest was covered by a hospital gown, but clearly bandaged beneath. His eyes were closed when we entered, but they fluttered open at the sound of footsteps. For a moment, there was no recognition in his gaze as he looked at me. Then his eyes widened, lips parting in shock. Jennifer, he whispered, voice raspy. It's Megan now, I corrected automatically. Megan, he repeated, as if testing the unfamiliar name. You came? I remained near the doorway, unable to approach closer. Yes. The silence stretched between us, 20 years of absence compressed into the small space of his hospital room. What does one say to a parent who abandoned you? To a daughter who never came back? You look like your mother, he finally said. I look like Sarah Miller, I replied firmly. My adoptive mother. His face tightened briefly, then relaxed into resignation. Of course. I deserve that. Dr. Reynolds stood slightly behind me, her presence grounding. Ethan hovered awkwardly near his father's bed, clearly uncertain of his role. Why did you want to see me? I asked directly, needing to establish control of the conversation. Frank seemed taken aback. You're my daughter. I was your daughter, I corrected, until you decided a 12-year-old needed to find her own way home from Chicago. He flinched visibly. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pick someone up. A mistake is being late. What you and Mom did was deliberate cruelty disguised as parenting. My voice remained steady, surprising me with its strength. Years of therapy had prepared me for this moment, though I'd never expected it to come. You're right, Frank said quietly. There's no excuse. I've had a lot of time to think, especially since. He gestured weakly at the medical equipment. When you're facing the end, you see things differently. Are you dying? I asked bluntly. Not immediately, they tell me. But this was a warning shot. He attempted a weak smile that didn't reach his eyes. Makes a man reflect on his regrets. And I'm a regret. What we did to you is my biggest regret, he clarified. Not you. Never you. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd heard from either parent, but it felt insufficient against the magnitude of their actions and the years of trauma that followed. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the door. Karen Taylor stood frozen in the entrance, coffee cup in hand, staring at me as if seeing a ghost. Jennifer, she breathed. It's Megan, Ethan corrected quickly. I turned to face the woman who had given birth to me, then laughingly abandoned me. At 65, she was still carefully put together, colored hair, applied makeup, tailored clothes, despite the hospital setting. Only her eyes betrayed her age and the stress of her husband's condition. I told you I'd arrange a different time, Ethan said apologetically to me. It's fine, I replied, though it wasn't. Having both parents present at once hadn't been part of my carefully constructed plan. Karen moved toward me as if to embrace me, but stopped when I instinctively stepped back. Her hands fluttered awkwardly before dropping to her sides. You're so beautiful, she said, eyes filling with tears. All grown up. I remained silent, unprepared for this additional confrontation. I've thought about you every day, she continued. Wondered where you were, if you were happy, if you ever thought about us. Karen, Frank warned weakly from his bed. Give her space. The irony of Frank Taylor advocating for boundaries was not lost on me. I need some air, I announced abruptly, turning toward the door. Dr. Reynolds immediately moved to accompany me. Please don't leave. Karen called after me. Please, we've missed you so much. I paused in the doorway, turning back to face both my birth parents. You missed me? I asked, my voice rising. You abandoned me in a strange city when I was 12 years old. You drove away laughing while I watched. You surrendered your parental rights rather than admit what you did was wrong. And now, 20 years later, you want to talk about missing me. The words poured out, years of unexpressed anger finally finding voice. Karen flinched as if physically struck. We were terrible parents, she admitted, tears now flowing freely. We didn't know how to love you properly. That's not an excuse, I replied. Millions of people figure out how to parent without abandoning their children. You're right, Frank interjected from his bed. There is no excuse. We failed you completely. The simple acknowledgement, devoid of justification, momentarily disarmed me. This was what I had needed to hear 20 years ago. Not explanations or defenses, but simple accountability. I didn't come here for apologies, I said finally. I came to see for myself that the people who had such power over me are just that. People. Flawed, aging, ordinary people who made unforgivable choices. Is there any chance? Karen began. No, I interrupted. There's no chance of reconciliation if that's what you're asking. That opportunity ended the moment you drove away from Union Station. What I can offer is closure for all of us. I looked directly at Frank in his hospital bed. I hope you recover fully from your surgery. I don't wish either of you ill. But I need you to understand that I am not Jennifer Taylor anymore. I haven't been for 20 years. I'm Megan Miller. I have wonderful adoptive parents, a loving husband, a successful career, and a life built far away from the damage you caused. My voice remained steady as I continued. I don't hate you anymore. That's taken years of work. But I don't forgive you either, and I don't want you in my life. Any contact should go through Ethan first, and I reserve the right to ignore it completely. The finality of my statement hung in the air. Karen sobbed quietly, while Frank closed his eyes, a single tear tracking down his weathered cheek. We understand, he said finally. Dr. Reynolds and I left shortly after, the confrontation having exhausted me emotionally. In the hospital parking lot, I stopped and took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling lighter than I had in years. You did beautifully, Dr. Reynolds observed. How are you feeling? Like I finally got to be the adult in the room with them, I replied. Like I took back some of the power they had over me for so long. Over the next few days, I processed the hospital encounter through additional therapy sessions and long conversations with Brian, Sarah, and Thomas. The experience had been draining, but ultimately empowering. I had faced my abusers on my terms and walked away intact. Ethan texted updates about our father's recovery, which I appreciated, but didn't feel compelled to act upon. I made it clear that while I was open to maintaining minimal contact with my brother, my boundaries regarding our parents remained firm. 1 week after the hospital visit, I sat at my desk, deleting the numerous contact attempts from my birth parents that had accumulated since our meeting. Karen had sent daily emails despite my clear statement about boundaries. Frank had tried calling twice. I blocked their numbers and email addresses without reading the messages, then called Sarah. I just wanted to say thank you, I told her when she answered. For everything. For showing me what parents should be. Oh, sweetheart, she replied warmly. You've given us far more than we could ever give you. That evening, Brian and I took Scout for a long walk through our neighborhood. The summer air was warm, fireflies beginning to appear in the gathering dusk. Scout trotted happily ahead, his one good eye bright with canine contentment. What are you thinking about? Brian asked, squeezing my hand. How sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to have, I replied. And how grateful I am that I found mine. The path forward wouldn't always be smooth. Trauma leaves lasting imprints, and healing isn't linear. But for perhaps the first time, I felt truly free of the shadow my birth parents had cast over my life. I had confronted them not as the frightened child they had abandoned, but as the strong, successful woman I had become despite them. The 12-year-old girl left alone at Union Station had found her way home after all. Not to the place she had come from, but to the life and family she had chosen for herself. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who hurt you? What helped you heal from childhood trauma? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength on your own healing journey.